Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 47 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm back in the saddle, but guys didn't really need me. I listened to both the podcasts you guys did. It was rather entertaining and informative.
Well, I think those are two of our goals, but it's fantastic to be back, Andy. Welcome back.
I heard you making fun of me in automation. So for the record, I like good automation. I don't like bad automation.
That's a reasonable viewpoint.
I was just making sure it was good automation, Andy. I had to do it.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. You're right. It's good. It's good to automate things that are worthy of being automated, and the process is good to start with.
That's right. That Jira guy, he'll automate anything.
So speaking of Jira, we got Jira Cox, who is our everything Nutanix guy, subject matter expert, well known. If I ever get in a situation where I need to validate myself with Nutanix people, I just mention Jira's name. And the fact I do a podcast with him and all of a sudden things are good. So Jira, I don't know where you got that shirt from, but I want one of those shirts. It's like a well with a bunch of containers on it. It's a Docker shirt.
Yeah, this must be, I'm going to go with VMworld 2012.
Yeah.
Way back.
Wow.
I like that. Is that one of those Docker ships sitting out in the port somewhere that can't get in, or has that been solved? Is that still an issue? I don't watch the news that much, and they haven't been talking about it. They've had other things to talk about. So we still have one of those container ships sitting out in ports somewhere.
I don't know. It's been a while since I saw headlines like that scroll by.
I'm guessing it's still an issue.
It's not as pressing an issue.
That's true. If I had to bet $1,
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's still supply chain hiccups somewhere.
Well, no, we did a podcast on what Nutanix is doing with Red Hat and what Kubernetes
Mm-hmm.
a few months ago. I got a kid, college kid that I'm starting to talk to about maybe working with us someday, and he's all into containers, and it's just funny to hear him talk about that as a strategy. Whereas I still talk about VMs. I don't talk about containers, so I know I'm old school and not in the app world the way I should be.
You got to live in both worlds. That's not even within a single company, not a single switch to flip.
Mm-hmm.
So got to live in both worlds.
I've been listening to a podcast and I want to share it with my team because it talks about IBM versus Microsoft back in the day. And I wonder how many people, modern age, younger people understand how that went down and how Microsoft, I won't say stole, but how Microsoft was able to get the code for the Windows operating system, DOS and Windows, early Windows, when they were developing it for IBM.
I heard it was referenced sort of as like a well-known truism, like they didn't overly explain it on a podcast, about someone being out of the office at IBM, like when it came time to do the contract review, and it just kind of slipped through some cracks there. I was like, I made a note that I'm like, wow, I need to read up on that. This
podcast didn't tell you what it talked about was, Bill Gates went to IBM and said, hey, I'll do the whole project for this amount. And IBM's like, oh, that's cheap. Are you sure? And he goes, yeah, just let me have the code. Let me have the libraries and the code base for it. And I'll just do the whole project. And then I can, maybe sell it to other people someday later. I'm not sure that's how exactly it went down, but IBM said, sure, no problem. And that changed everything.
A winning strategy.
That makes me feel ill too, because it harkens a time when they used to call the PCs IBM compatible.
Yeah.
Well, that was the whole takeaway, is they didn't realize that meant other software makers, which is where the real money is, could then turn around and write their software for other vendors, and IBM wouldn't have this locked in ecosystem that they controlled their destiny the way maybe Apple does with the Macintosh. And that's where IBM went from being a most powerful technology company on the planet to just being what they are today, which is still a big company, but not what they could have been.
Yeah, that just makes me laugh too, that when you said Macintosh, it made me think that's probably the first time that you actually have to spell out the abbreviation and not the long term. Most people just know it as Mac.
Right. That was a pivotal moment. Well, that's the voice of Harvey Green. Most of you guys know, and super friendly, most polite. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to the podcast the last couple weeks going, man, that Harvey is just a really likable dude.
Oh gosh.
I was like, no wonder people like him more than me.
Jeez, cut it out.
You can't laugh that much and not be liked. Okay, so we picked a blog for today. It says Kickstart 2022 by simplifying your database operations. And I know this has been out for a month or so, but we thought it was appropriate for a couple of reasons. One, the conversation around Era, Nutanix, I about said IBM, Nutanix Era. That was a very hot topic last week at HIMSS. And we have a workshop coming up monthly now, I think. We're going to start doing an Era workshop. And so we want to bring more attention to that. According to the Nutanix guys we talked to, there's a lot of demand to talk about Era, and there's a lot of problems it solves.
Yes, that is correct.
So Harvey, we'll bring it to you first. Why did you and Jaira think that this was a topic we should cover?
Well, that's a great question. So as you kind of just talked about, it is a hot topic that a lot of people are talking about. It is also a very important topic, even outside of people talking about it, because before they were talking about it, it was important enough to work on. I mean, we've talked for years and years and years, and I know people have heard and are used to the term VM sprawl. The new one right now is database sprawl, because they're everywhere. You need them for everything. You have these, used to be, these very small databases, and you could have one database server and, have everything you needed be hosted by that one. And it has just gotten way more complex since then, and needing to have test environments and QA and dev and all of these environments that you want to make sure that you've got data in, and being able to manage backups that come with that, and the way that they're built, and dare I say, automating the build process so that you'll have some consistency around that. It just became a very, very big hassle, and everybody doesn't have the knowledge and resources to handle it in a impactful way, in a good way. So they need help, and lo and behold, Nutanix gave them help.
So I haven't been a systems administrator for, I guess 15 years now, maybe a little more. And even then I had, little databases over here, little databases over there. So Jaira, are you guys still seeing that that's a common problem?
Totally. Yeah. Every job I've worked, every customer I talk to, could just rattle off a dozen different products that, the installer goes next, provide your SQL connection details here, finish, right? They sort of bring your own database to run the software kind of design. And that's best case, right? Worst case, it might even be like, give me the media, I'll install it for you, or it's automated, or it's even more opinionated on how it needs to connect or how it needs to be set up. All kinds of wild stuff. I think the answer for the value of why we're talking about it is right there in the title, right? It's simplicity and databases, right? So like databases, probably the heart of every environment, some of the most critical data, the most important data, and also the part of the environment that needs the most performance. Everything talks to it, gets data in it, out of it, does analytics on it. The criticality of the data is pretty apparent, but then also the simplicity, right? So like it's sort of this necessary evil that everyone has and wrangles and deals with and provisions. And then quite topical, right? Or timely, it's 2022. Virtually every customer I talk to has open recs, open headcount, is looking for the right people. That ability to say, what if we brought simplicity to this environment, right? To let the folks we have on staff do more with their time, get more out of their day, spend less time doing busy work, provisioning, all that good stuff. Right? Let's do more of that good automation. There's so much value there.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Is it database sprawl or database and database server sprawl? Are there servers and VMs? I hope at least VMs going along with all this sprawl. Or is there just a bunch of databases piled up on a couple of database servers?
All of the above.
Yeah, definitely. Could absolutely be both. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as we talk through this, I kind of want to know where Era solves that challenge and how. I used to get into arguments a little bit where I would say, hey, IT, it's not about infrastructure, it's about the applications, and applications are the number one most important thing. And I did have someone maybe multiple times say, hey, it's not the applications, it's the data that matters. I guess it's fair to say that you can't have one without the other and they're useless without each other.
Was it that? Or, I mean, it's also kind of like the old joke about the blind man and the elephant, right? Like, oh, it's a tree. Oh, it's a snake, oh, it's a giant rock. It's like, well, the network guy would say the network's the most important part, right? The storage guy would say the storage is the most important part. But they're both right. Like, is it the data? Is it the database? Is it the application? Well, they're all useless without the other, right? So probably a bit of an academic debate to pick which one's most important. They're all critical and required.
I'm going to have to hear that joke from you one day.
Oh, I did a terrible job of it. You haven't heard that joke before?
No.
Blind man. This is listen to Jaira Google on a podcast. Blind man and elephant. This is why people tune in.
I just wonder if the blind man was like smell and taste deaf or something. He couldn't smell the elephant.
Okay,
I just like that you said listening to Jaira Google on a podcast. So you kind of let everybody know that you're not Googling every other time, right?
Oh, you got to advertise what brings in the crowds, man. Okay. A group of blind, this is from Wikipedia. A group of blind men heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought to town. None of them were aware of its shape or form. Out of curiosity, they said, we must inspect it and know it by touch, which we are capable of. So they sought it out, found out about the elephant. The first person whose hand landed on the trunk said, "It's this being is thick like a thick snake." For another one whose hand reached the ear, they're like, "Oh no, the animal is shaped like a fan." A third person touched the leg and said, "Well, this thing is shaped like a tree." Another blind man touched the side of the elephant and said, "It's like a wall." The one who grabbed the tail said, "It's like a rope." The one who grabbed a tusk said, "It's like a spear, smooth but long and hard." So that's the analogy of, your perspective matters and shapes your opinions on something. It's not a joke. It's a story. It's a parable. Sorry.
Ah, got it.
What about the other guy standing beside the guy who grabbed the tail? What happened there?
Left as an exercise up to the reader.
This trunk's got a hole in it. This tree trunk's got a hole in it. This formation's got a hole in it. All right. Well, I think we've kind of talked about the challenge. I think the article, the blog set up with the challenge of every year at the end of the year, there's a lot of retailers that have to spin up a bunch of repositories. And that creates just more mess, and that mess begets more mess every year. And the next thing you got a whole elephant worth of databases.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, the framing story of the blog post here talks about, one specific retailer, right, and their journey to evaluate, right, and solve for this problem around things like seasonal surges, need for rapid deployment or to shrink deployment times. And then also operating as a global retailer, right? How do I standardize and speed up operations globally, right? Not just have one giant center of excellence. I need, multiple of them.
Yeah. So the solution talks about HP Enterprise, Greenlake with Nutanix Era. One of you guys, Harvey, I'll let you start because I think you've been working with these guys some lately. What is HPE Greenlake?
So Greenlake, you set me up for failure here, but I'll try it. Greenlake is a program that will allow for customers to basically take either a mix or all capital expenditures and represent it to them in an OpEx model. So it allows for the customer to be able to actually have the purchasing power of a one-time purchase, but have that be set up in payments so that they can actually have something that it fits more of an operating expense model. And that is, something that you can do with hardware or with services, licenses, anything that any partnership or vendor partnership that HPE has becomes something that is a possibility for you. And we're discussing it today with being able to partner HP Greenlake with the Nutanix Era. So that kind of leads us to where we are. And hopefully I hit that well.
So does that mean you get a bunch of hardware and then you're only paying for the amount of the hardware you're using?
So yes, you do get, yes, a great point too. You do get the ability to get in the hardware you need, but also some headroom on that. You're paying for what you use, and when you need the headroom, you already have it. And when you start filling that headroom that you have there, then they'll work with you on getting some additional hardware in or licensing in to take you to basically the next level. So as you grow, it can grow with you. But again, it's an operating expense model. So what grows as well as that is just the amount that you're paying per month for that.
So
Yeah, I
Jair,
mean,
how
it's
close
useful
was
for the way the article describes it, right? It's cloud where you need it, right? So whether that's
Yes.
at the edge, in the data center, anywhere in between, it's that ability to say, I need it here, and just grow that as your operating expenses, agreement with HPE.
So you have this big pie basically, and you're putting the compute wherever you need it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that can be in a partner data center. It can be in your on-premises data center. Is there a cloud option for this too?
Probably, yeah. So yeah, a lot of flexibility. And the reason why it matters is because, so with Greenlake giving you sort of like a cloud platform, right? Because Greenlake runs Nutanix fantastically. As a cloud platform as a service wherever you need it, then Era is database as a service wherever you need it, right? So Era by itself lets you take infrastructure, running Nutanix, and go back to your business and say, now we have on-prem database as a service, right? So you can, hit a CLI or a UI or however your application owners want to interact with the team, automate it through ServiceNow, whatever you want, to say, I want new databases, I want new database servers, I want database replication, I want database protection, all as a service. That the value of that is huge, but when you stack that on top of infrastructure as a service as well, now you can just say yes to a whole bunch of problems at once, right? Like, yes,
Right.
I can stand that up in that data center. Yes, I can stand it up in that partner environment. Yes, I can stand it up at the edge, wherever it's needed, right? These are all simple problems to solve now.
So that's pretty easy to understand when you're talking about Nutanix, right? Because you've got this compute plus storage in that compute, some architecture of that, and then I guess, so does this Greenlake stuff, does it phone home and tell the mothership when you're consuming 80% of it and somebody needs to send more?
Yeah, I think there definitely is monitoring. I'm not up on all the details. There's definitely monitoring. There's communications about it. They can help you administer it and run it, right? They might be the one telling you it's 80% full. Do you want to grow more?
So that applies to both servers, virtual machines, containers, and then in this case, databases. Help me understand what Era is. I know we've done a podcast on it. I think I still am a little confused. Is Era VMs or databases being spun up in the Nutanix environment?
Yeah, so Era is fundamentally, right, from like a VM perspective, it's a virtual appliance. But from a capability perspective, it transforms the Nutanix cluster into a database as a service cluster, right? So that then your internal customers, right, your application owners, your lines of business, your developers have a place that they can come to request new resources, right? Whether that's, this article goes on to talk about whether that's SQL, Oracle, Postgres, MongoDB, that ability to request new resources, get them automated and deployed and turned over back to them, right? Here, developer, here's your SQL instance, here's your SQL database, here's your connection string, right? For, a secure dev environment, provided for you on your request. Maybe it only lives for 7 days. Maybe it lives forever and can be extended. Maybe it's a clone of another running server. All these fantastic capabilities, right, that just get unlocked easily, right, through Era and the automation it does against Nutanix clusters.
And are these VMs or containers, or can they be either one?
Today, it's primarily all virtual machines. Today, yeah. So primarily all VMs like snapshots, cloning, disk presentation, so forth.
And is it typically a one-to-one where you have one database per VM, or are there VMs with multiple databases?
that would be your choice. There's no requirement to have only one database per server.
Mhm.
You can have multiple.
And how are database administrators viewing this? Is this an improvement on their world, or is this a threat to their job?
Oh no, it's absolutely an improvement, right? Because I mean, picture the average environment, right, with let's say hundreds of databases, right, and that might potentially be a low estimate. You know, all the minutia, right, of like installing, patching, even for depending on the size of your shop, reporting on like what versions of SQL are we running, right? What versions of Oracle are we running? That could be a huge landscape, right? Like even just maintaining an accurate inventory could be challenging. What if you woke up tomorrow and the next kind of, we see them about twice a year now, these all hands on deck fire drill of this wild exploit that, is being used by bad guys. If the next one of those targets SQL, right? How quickly can you know what versions of SQL do we have? What's affected? What's patched? And do I know when it is checked off the list, right? Even just maintaining an accurate inventory there are all tasks that, in my opinion, are like, they're so basic blocking and tackling. I would never want a DBA in my organization to be burning time on them, right? If it's literally such a repeatable process of like deploy Windows Server, join to the domain, install SQL, make sure it's up to this approved patch level, create a database, give it a secure SA password, send that password off to the application owner that wants a new dev environment. That's such a repeatable process, right? It's just a candidate for good automation, TM, that, why would I want a human spending time on it?
Yeah. When my Windows NT 4 days, I had to go through Microsoft SQL as one of my classes, and it was the worst of all of them. And I just had this moment of, well, maybe I should have been a DBA.
Yeah.
I mean,
I kind of got excited about you talking about that, and I could have been the cool kid doing databases at this point.
I mean, it's the most important, it's the heart of the organization, right? It's where all the data is.
It absolutely might make you the most important man in IT, which maybe I would have relished in that. Okay. So I could see so does this essentially just give administrators, IT departments, IT teams the ability to have a clustered, scalable, both up and down environment for running their various enterprise databases? Is that what we're really talking about here? And maintaining it?
Yeah, totally. So if I think about like the sort of the Venn diagram, right, of overlapping circles here, at the center of these three awesome circles are Nutanix as, cloud infrastructure, as software that for the last, I guess now we're like a 13-year-old company, built to be cloud-like, built to scale from the very beginning. That runs best tied to hardware, right, that can scale on demand, right, compared to, oh, I need another node that takes 3 months of procurement to go through. Well, now you're still cloud-like, but you have to plan quite far ahead of your cloud growth, right? For these like CapEx purchases, right? You can see the advantages being tied to, say, an OpEx-driven on-prem platform, right? Where it's just all hardware as a service, right? HP, Greenlake as a service. So now I've got my Nutanix cloud as a service on my HP Greenlake as a service, and then I can couple that with Era to present all of that as database as a service back to my app owners, my devs, my next gen, teams, right, for application modernization. So now all of what used to be, let's say generously, like perhaps a 2 to 3 week build process to get a new database server to go from like an idea on a whiteboard to like an actual SQL cluster up and running with credentials turned over to the dev team. We can take that from like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes even longer, down to, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours, depending, 20 minutes, depending on the level of automation that you need there. And that just cuts through so much red tape, right? Gives people what they need faster, with automated approvals if you need that in ServiceNow, or just let people have stuff and request it when they need it. Cut through the red tape, get it all faster.
Well, and I think part of what you just highlighted was the databases are going to be where the applications are going to be, and the applications are going to be where they need to be. And that could be cloud, that could be partner data center, that could be your data center, that could be edge of your environments. And simplifying the hosting platform for that just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, totally right. I mean, like the article calls out the customer. This was help that realized these benefits in the framing blog post story. talks about, improving operations at the US and European and Asia data centers, right? So like that create the landscape where I, as an application owner, can pick where does it need to land? Do I want a third copy of it in some other data center as well? But no, I can get that consistency of experience in any of those availability zones, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I love to see this, right? Calling out, helping this customer, improve the developer experience, complete projects faster, deliver faster, even during like crunch time, right? Like a long holiday season is when all hands are on deck for a retailer like that, and still helping them execute faster, get things done faster, right? That makes them heroes to the business.
And Harvey, does this mean I also get to use Prism Central, and the UI that goes along with that to have vision into what's going on with these databases?
Always. That's why I like it. But yes, you get to continue to utilize the knowledge you already have around the Nutanix solutions. And then you have Era on top of it, where you can go and manage your databases, and with that same sort of simplistic type interface, but still have the power behind being able to do and use all of the features available to you.
Well, I think, I mean, the way I describe it is it shows the right information to the right folks, right? So my infrastructure team cares about, how many Nutanix clusters do I have? How full are they? How fast are they running? How's my VM health? Things that I probably don't need to be surfacing and painting on a dashboard for my DBAs, right? They care about what are my databases, what size are they, what version of database engine are they running? I need to be prepping for the next change window and like patching those databases, right? Which Era helps you automate. Different things that they care about, right? So Era is like the DBA focused Prism, right? It's like just stats for DBAs, just an environment for DBAs to use either in the GUI or automation or however you want to connect to it, APIs, blah, blah, blah. Like, it shows you DBA things for DBAs.
So in the Nutanix world, you're usually one of two camps, right? You're the Nutanix is everything and I host everything on it, or you're the Nutanix is specific where a workload, right? That we do a lot of VDI hosting with Nutanix in the hyperconverged solution.
Mm-hmm.
Do these Era implementations, are they commingled with the rest of the cluster, or are they typically dedicated clusters?
So it's your choice, and it's honestly not a technology driven decision. Usually the meaningful tipping point there is going to be database licensing, right? Database licensing commonly at scale will encourage you as a customer to build a database silo, right? Like, this is my cluster for SQL, this is my cluster for Oracle, what have you. And so licensing really drives us to that conversation, right? Or once in a while, like extreme dedicated performance, right? Like, I'm going to buy this and I want every single megahertz, every single megabyte dedicated to the databases for this one application.
It's all mine.
What?
They're all mine.
Yeah, totally, right?
I've definitely heard that from DBAs before.
But so really, and that's what a licensing, or call it a procurement argument in some ways, neither of which are a technology argument. So the technology doesn't care. You could intermingle all day long. And we see that maybe perhaps more at smaller scale. At larger scale, we do tend to see dedicated clusters for those reasons.
Yeah. And Jaira, the licensing part, that comes down to how databases are licensed based on the underlying hardware. Is that
right? Commonly by core, and if I'm going to pay, insert very large painful price tag here per core to my database technology, well, then I don't want to run anything else on that core, right? Like, let's pack that full of just that one database technology.
right? Yeah, physical cores, which used to be physical sockets back when I was a young whippersnapper. Then it became
yeah, before CPUs got, it's such an interesting, ebb and flow, right? Of like multi-socket versus multi-core. Always changing.
All right. Well, guys, I think we covered it. Harvey, when's your first Era workshop?
It is, I'm going to say this Friday, but I know the podcast doesn't always interact with us exactly the same day. So I will say it is on Friday, March 25th.
Okay.
Friday, March 25th. There you go.
Well, I'll try as a favor. I'll try to get this one out early tomorrow.
So if you,
Maybe tonight, if I can sneak away, my wife doesn't see me.
Nice.
so it's safe to say if you don't care about cost of database sprawl, if you have unlimited space for storing lots of copies of the same data over and over again, and you don't mind DBAs taking forever doing, remedial basic tasks like patching and deployment, then you should not attend this workshop because you will not, it will not scratch any itches you've got.
Right.
But if any of that's important to you, hey, Harvey will tell you a thing or two about databases and on Nutanix using Era.
Absolutely.
Do you have to be a database expert, or is this a way to simplify and lower the curve a little bit?
Yeah, this is a way to get through like a database expert, even if you're not.
No, it absolutely supports. Sorry, I know we're coming in for a landing here, but like to go deep for one more second, it really supports the current trend in the industry, right, of empowering generalists to do more, right? Because that's another way of simplifying both in some ways like hiring and talent acquisition, but also like day-to-day operations, right? Like if I only have 2 database guys, well, now their life is like somewhat degraded from like an on-call standpoint. One of them's always on call all the time. Whereas if I can use something like Era to let anyone on my team stand up a new SQL database, because it's one button to click and then it's all automated after that, well, that's empowering, right? And it's democratizing. Anybody can do that. My app owners can do that, right? I can put that in ServiceNow if I wanted to. So for sure, it absolutely, it creates a path for simplifying a lot of those operations, right? To let more people do more things with simpler interfaces in standardized fashion, right? Again, repeatability lends itself to stability. So,
Well, and that's very much what you guys have done on the storage side too. You kind of made it to where the average man can run an environment that includes a heavy dose of storage, because the smartness of the software and the UI makes it easier for them to implement and maintain it and deprovision it.
totally. Oh yeah, the a word to end a Monday on, the ephemerality of some databases. It for sure like lends itself to that, right? Like I want to create a clone of that production database environment. I want that clone to live for testing a new version of the app as a dev environment for like 7 days, and then self-destruct, because in 7 days I don't need the clone anymore. It's all old data, throw it away. The ability to bring intelligence to that of like, how do I create the clone? How do I copy the data over? How do I keep it efficient, right? I want it to not be a full second set of blocks. Let's make it a writable clone using primary storage. So it's fast, but it doesn't take a lot of space, but it can't affect production. And then the auto self-destruct in 7 days or whatever your timer is, right? Is all powerful end to end for sure.
Yeah. And you stick that in some remote data center where you feel like it's safe and you've got your redundancy covered.
Yeah.
And how much does this take away the need for like the old school clustering?
Well, remember, like we'll always fight for and recommend application level availability, right? Like there's nothing better than your multi-site load balancer in front of independent, like front end, like whatever your web server is at the front end of an application behind a clustered database across 2 data centers, right? Nothing will ever beat that from like an availability, RPO, RTO, customer experience level. Usually, we get asked as an infrastructure provider to solve application availability problems with infrastructure, right? Because application availability gets more complex or costs more, or we have to deal with things like, locking, synchronization, continuity. So clustering can always be the more right answer, right? It comes down to often, again, licensing. Do you want to pay for the licensing tier of your database that lets you do an active instance across 2 clusters? If you do, great. Era can stand that up for you, right? Whether that's SQL AAG, whether that's like Oracle RAC, like you can go to Era and say, I would like to have a SQL AAG, please. And one leg goes in that cluster, one leg goes in that cluster, done. If you are aiming for a slightly lower level of availability and making up for it with infrastructure, well, that's Era too, right? I want a single VM, single database, and I will replicate it with Nutanix and be able to recover it somewhere else as well, taking a little bit of a downtime while the VM boots up, right?
Yeah, cool. I feel like a database guru now and haven't even touched it.
There we go, job done.
And Harvey,
well, no, you should come to the workshop, right? Then you really feel like a database guru.
That's right.
I'll be working somewhere else next week and trying to get a DBA job. Even I can do it now. Maybe. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate it for Monday. It's been great, and I am ready for this day to be over. I've got a homeowners association meeting that I desperately do not want to go to, but that's where I'm heading next. So it never ends. But
Gotta go.
my wife likes to say I bring that upon myself, and she's probably right.
I was just thinking that's like usually a problem of your own making. Like, those are actually optional.
Yeah. No, nobody forced me to sign up to be on the HOA board. I thought it would be good and I'd be helpful. What I found out though is I'm not like Harvey. People don't just like me, and now half the neighborhood hates me because I want to fix stuff. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your Monday and have a good week.
Y'all too.
You too.